At 1840 hours on November 14, 1940, Flight Lieutenant John Cunningham sat in his Bristol Beaufighter at RAF Middle Wallop, watching ground crew signal his aircraft ready for immediate scramble. 23 years old, 85 Squadron, 5 confirmed kills, Britain's rising star in the desperate science of night interception. The Germans had launched their largest raid yet, 18 Heinkel He 111 bombers, escorted by Messerschmitt Bf-110 night fighters, all heading toward the industrial heartland. Cunningham knew what was at stake. Coventry produced 20% of Britain's aircraft engines, vital munitions factories, critical manufacturing. If those bombers got through, production would collapse for months. The invasion threat would intensify. Britain might not survive. His Beaufighter carried the AI-Mk4 radar, the most advanced airborne interception system in the world. The Germans had nothing like it. But Cunningham had a secret he shared with only his radar operator. The system failed 40% of the time above 10,000 feet. Moisture froze the cathode ray tubes, the display went dark, and German bombers always flew high. Tonight, Cunningham would climb to 12,000 feet, hunting 18 bombers. His radar would work perfectly, until it didn't. If you want to see how a night fighter pilot hunted blind while a city burned below and made a decision that saved thousands but cost him everything, smash that like button. Subscribe because we're bringing you the stories they don't teach in history class, the missions where heroes failed, where technology broke, where impossible choices defined character. Comment your location right now. Back to Cunningham and the night his radar died.
Cunningham's Beaufighter roared off Middle Wallop's runway at 1847 hours. The Bristol Hercules 11 radial engines produced 1,400 horsepower each. Maximum speed, 323 miles per hour. Armament, 4 20mm Hispano cannons in the belly, 6 .303 Browning machine guns in the wings. The Beaufighter was fast, heavily armed, and stable, perfect for radar-guided night interception. But speed and firepower meant nothing if you couldn't find the target. Sergeant Philip Rabone sat behind Cunningham, operating the AI-Mk4 radar. The system used a transmitter mounted in the nose, sending radio pulses forward. When those pulses hit an aircraft, they bounced back. Rabone's cathode ray tube display showed the return as a glowing blip. Maximum detection range, 3 miles. That was revolutionary in 1940. German bombers had no idea British fighters could see them in total darkness. Ground control vectored Cunningham north toward Birmingham. The German formation was 40 miles out, altitude 11,000 feet, speed 180 knots. Cunningham pushed the throttles forward. The Beaufighter climbed at 1,800 feet per minute. At 1853 hours, Rabone got the first contact. Range 2.5 miles, heading 020 degrees, altitude 11,500 feet. Cunningham turned to intercept. The radar-guided hunt had begun. But Cunningham knew the statistics. 5 previous scrambles, 5 radar failures above 10,000 feet. The AI-Mk4 couldn't handle moisture at altitude. Water vapor condensed on cold components. Electrical shorts killed the display. Technicians couldn't fix it. The physics were brutal. Cunningham climbed through 10,000 feet. The radar still worked. 11,000 feet, contact, holding steady on Rabone's scope. 11,500 feet. They were at bomber altitude now. Range decreased to 1.5 miles. Cunningham could almost taste the intercept. Then at 12,000 feet, Rabone's voice came through the intercom. Displays gone black, no signal. Radar's dead.
The timing was catastrophic. Cunningham was 1.5 miles from a confirmed German bomber, closing at 140 knots relative speed. In darkness, without radar, the bomber would disappear in seconds. Cunningham had 3 options: return to base and admit defeat, continue the intercept using visual search, nearly impossible in total darkness, or maintain heading and hope to spot engine exhausts. Cunningham chose option 3. He held his course, eyes scanning the blackness ahead. German Heinkel 111 bombers had 2 Junkers Jumo 211 engines. Each engine produced visible exhaust flames, faint orange glows in darkness. If Cunningham got lucky, if the bomber maintained course, if the crew didn't spot him first, he might acquire visual contact. The mathematics were brutal. At 140 knots closing speed, Cunningham covered 1.5 miles in 38 seconds. But human eyes needed time to adjust, time to scan, time to process visual information. Missing the target by 100 yards meant overshooting with no way to reacquire. And 17 other German bombers were heading toward Coventry while Cunningham chased one contact he couldn't see. Ground control's voice crackled. "Rabbit leader, additional contacts detected. Count now 18 bandits, multiple vectors. Coventry expects strike in 22 minutes. Cunningham's jaw tightened. 18 bombers, 22 minutes, 1 night fighter with dead radar. The mission was already lost. But quitting meant those bombers reached Coventry unopposed. At 1856 hours, Cunningham spotted exhaust flames. 2 faint orange glows, 800 yards ahead, slightly below his altitude. The Heinkel bomber was exactly where the last radar contact predicted. Cunningham eased the Beaufighter into position, below and behind the target, classic night fighter approach. The bomber crew had no idea he was there. Range 600 yards. Cunningham armed his cannons. 4 20mm Hispano guns, 60 rounds per gun, 240 rounds total. Enough for maybe 15 seconds sustained fire. Night fighter doctrine said, get close, fire 1 burst, confirm the kill, move to next target. But without radar, finding an X target was impossible. Cunningham closed to 400 yards. The Heinkel silhouette became visible against slightly less dark sky. Bomber crews called it a flying spade because of the distinctive shape. Glass nose for the bombardier, dorsal gunner position, ventral gunner underneath. 3 defensive positions, all with 7.92mm MG-15 machine guns. If the gunners spotted Cunningham, they'd open fire. The clean intercept would turn into a gunfight. At 300 yards, Cunningham centered the Heinkel in his gun sight and squeezed the trigger. The 4 cannons roared. Tracers streaked across darkness. 20mm high-explosive shells tore through the Heinkel's port engine and wing root. The bomber's fuel tanks ignited. Fire spread across the wing. The Heinkel rolled left and entered a dive. Cunningham watched it fall, burning, toward the English countryside below. It crashed at 1858 hours. 1 bomber down, 17 remaining, and Cunningham's radar was still dead.
Ground control vectored Cunningham toward a second contact, but without radar, the vectors were useless. Cunningham could fly to the general area, but finding a specific bomber in 3-dimensional darkness required radar guidance. He was hunting blind in an ocean of sky. At 1902 hours, Cunningham made a decision that would haunt him for decades. He radioed ground control. Rabbit leader requesting vectors to bomber stream approach path will attempt head-on visual interceptions. It was tactical madness. Head-on attacks meant closing speeds over 400 knots. Reaction time measured in fractions of seconds. Miss the shot and you had no chance for a second attempt. But it was also the only way to engage multiple bombers without radar. Ground control gave him the bomber stream heading, 020 degrees, altitude 11,000 to 12,000 feet, estimated position over Banbury. Cunningham turned south and descended to 11,500 feet, positioning himself in the bomber's approach path. He would fly the reciprocal heading, 200 degrees, straight into the German formation. When he spotted engine exhausts, he'd have seconds to fire before the bombers flashed past. At 1907 hours,
Cunningham saw them. Multiple sets of engine exhausts scattered across the sky ahead like distant fireflies. 4 bombers, maybe 5, spread across a mile of darkness, all heading toward Coventry. Cunningham armed his cannons and picked the nearest target. Range was impossible to judge without radar. Too far, and he'd waste ammunition. Too close, and he'd collide. Cunningham waited until the bomber's silhouette became visible, then fired. 3-second burst. The tracers converged on the Heinkel's nose section. Glass shattered. The bombardier's position exploded, but the bomber stayed airborne, engines still running, continuing toward Coventry. The Heinkel flashed past Cunningham's wing at 420 knots closing speed. Gone in an instant. No time for a second shot. No way to confirm if the bomber would survive or crash. Cunningham had damaged it, maybe killed the bombardier, but he didn't know if the mission kill was achieved. A second bomber appeared ahead. Cunningham fired again. 2-second burst. Shells raked the Heinkel's starboard engine. Fire erupted. The bomber rolled right. Cunningham watched it for 3 seconds, then lost sight of it as it descended. Damaged? Destroyed? He'd never know. His ammunition counter showed 132 rounds remaining, enough for maybe 3 more attacks, but ground control's voice interrupted. All Rabbit units, Coventry reports fires visible, first bombers releasing ordnance, estimate 15 bandits still inbound. Cunningham had engaged 2, maybe 3 bombers. 15 remained. The math was crushing. Even if he expended every remaining round and scored perfect hits, a dozen bombers would still reach Coventry.
At 1913 hours, Cunningham saw the glow on the horizon. Coventry was burning. Orange and red light reflected off clouds. The German incendiary bombs were creating firestorms. Factories, homes, churches, all engulfed. And more bombers were still coming. Cunningham spotted another Heinkel, fired his remaining ammunition in 2 desperate bursts. The first missed completely. The second hit the bomber's tail section. The Heinkel wavered, but continued flying. Cunningham's ammunition counter hit 0. He was out of cannon rounds. His 6.303 machine guns had ammunition remaining, but .303 rounds were inadequate against bombers. They could damage, but rarely destroyed. Ground control vectored him toward another contact, but Cunningham made the hardest decision of his career. He turned away. With no radar, no cannon ammunition, and Coventry already under attack, continuing the mission was futile. Other RAF night fighters were scrambling. They'd have working radar. They'd have full ammunition. Cunningham returning to base meant another sortie could launch in his Beaufighter. The decision was tactically sound. It was also personally devastating. Cunningham landed at Middle Wallop at 19:28 hours. Ground crew swarmed his aircraft, refueling and rearming for a second sortie. Technicians worked on the radar, replacing components, testing circuits. But the process took time, 40 minutes minimum. By then, the Coventry raid would be over. Cunningham climbed out of the cockpit and stood on the tarmac, watching the orange glow to the north. He could hear the explosions from 60 miles away. The city was dying while he stood on safe ground with a broken aircraft. Intelligence officers wanted his debrief immediately. How many bombers engaged? How many destroyed? Cunningham reported honestly. 1 confirmed kill, 2 probable damages, 1 possible damage, against 18 bombers. The officers wrote his report without comment, but the numbers spoke for themselves. At 20:45 hours, the Coventry raid ended. 18 German bombers had dropped 50 tons of incendiaries and high explosives. 568 people died, 850 seriously injured. Coventry Cathedral destroyed. 12 munitions factories heavily damaged. Aircraft engine production stopped for 3 months. And RAF Fighter Command flew 119 sorties that night. Not one German bomber was shot down by a night fighter. Cunningham's single kill
came before his radar failed.
The raid on Coventry exposed night fighting's fundamental problem. Radar was revolutionary, but unreliable. Visual interception in darkness was nearly impossible. German bombers could attack British cities with minimal losses. The Blitz would continue for months. Cunningham flew his second sortie at 22:40 hours. The technicians had replaced his radar's cathode ray tube. The system worked perfectly for 17 minutes, then failed again at 11,500 feet. He returned to base without engaging any targets. Over the next 3 months, Cunningham flew 47 night interception sorties. His radar failed 19 times. He scored 3 more kills, all achieved in the brief windows when his equipment functioned. By February 1941, RAF technicians redesigned the AI Mark IV with better moisture protection. Failure rates dropped to 15%. By May 1941, they introduced AI Mark V with heated components. The system finally worked reliably above 10,000 feet. Cunningham went on to become the RAF's top night fighter ace. 20 confirmed kills by war's end. He received the Distinguished Service Order twice, the Distinguished Flying Cross twice. The British press called him Cat's Eyes Cunningham, claiming he ate carrots to improve night vision. Propaganda to hide Britain's radar advantage. But Cunningham never forgot November 14, 1940. The night his radar died. The night he hunted blind while Coventry burned. The night he made the right tactical decision that felt like abandonment. Years later, historians analyzing the Coventry raid noted a crucial detail. Cunningham's one confirmed kill had been the lead navigation bomber. The aircraft carried the Pathfinder responsible for marking targets for the following bombers. When Cunningham shot it down, the German formation lost coordination. Their bombing was less accurate than planned. Several factories they targeted remained operational. Cunningham's single victory, achieved moments before his radar failed, possibly saved hundreds of lives by disrupting German attack precision. But Cunningham never knew that during the mission. He only knew he'd failed to stop 17 bombers. He never knew his impossible choice to break off and rearm was doctrinally correct. He only felt he'd abandoned Coventry. The night fighter campaign eventually succeeded. By 1943, improved radar and tactics turned the tide. German bomber losses became unsustainable. The Blitz ended. But success came from learning through failure. The Coventry raid showed that radar alone wasn't enough. Pilots needed backup procedures. Equipment needed redundancy. Training had to include blind visual interception as a fallback. Every improvement emerged from analyzing what went wrong on November 14, 1940. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Real heroism isn't always victory. Sometimes it's making impossible choices when everything fails. Subscribe, because we're telling the stories that show the complete picture, triumph and tragedy, victory and loss. Drop a comment right now. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us if your family has stories of impossible decisions during wartime. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering that heroes sometimes fail, and failure sometimes teaches more than victory. John Cunningham deserves to be remembered not just for his 20 kills, but for the night he hunted blind while a city burned, made the tactically correct decision that felt like defeat, and carried that burden for the rest of his life.